West African youth are no longer just protesting governments. They're turning on ECOWAS itself. And at the center of their defiance stands a 35-year-old soldier, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. But why is an entire generation rejecting the region's most powerful institution and choosing a man the bloc wants isolated? Let's find out. In an age where most West African politicians spend more time abroad than on their streets, where leadership is measured by how fast you bow to the IMF or how fluent you are in French, one figure has flipped the entire script, and he didn't do it with speeches or slogans. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is young, unapologetically African, and unbothered by international outrage. And that, precisely, is why he's catching fire across a continent where the youth have been raised on disappointment. But to understand why he's become a lightning rod for African youth, you have to understand what the youth are up against. This is a generation born into post-colonial independence, but still shackled by the consequences of colonial dependency. They've grown up watching their natural resources being dug out and flown away. They've sat through endless reform plans that never touched their villages. They've seen presidents elected with Western fanfare only to disappear behind palace gates once in office. And through it all, ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, was supposed to be the answer. It was supposed to represent regional unity. Instead, to many, it came to represent silence, betrayal, and obedience. So when Traoré stormed into power not to beg, but to cut off the begging bowl entirely, the reaction was immediate and electric. Youth movements across Africa began to post his quotes. TikTok turned his speeches into ringtones. Young people who had never cared for politics before now painted his face on banners, shouted his name at rallies, and began organizing not around parties, but around principles. And the principle was simple. Africa must stand for itself or fall for everyone else. Traoré didn't need an embassy endorsement or international funding to ignite this movement. All he needed was to show that it's possible to say no and still survive. That it's possible to chase out foreign troops, nationalize gold mines, and break free from colonial agreements, and not collapse in the process. It's possible to lead with audacity, not apology. And for the youth watching from Ghana, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Togo, and Senegal, this was more than political theater. It was permission. Permission to question why ECOWAS never sanctions corruption, but always punishes sovereignty. Permission to ask why a bloc that claims to protect democracy always protects the same families, the same business interests, the same imperial relationships. The love for Traoré is not because he's perfect, it's because he's uncompromised. He didn't arrive in power via the smooth elevator of party machinery. He climbed out of a collapsing military campaign against insurgents, took command in a country abandoned by its allies, and declared, publicly and unflinchingly, that no foreign nation will dictate our future. To the youth, this wasn't rebellion. It was reality. Because they live with the daily consequences of external control, from overpriced fuel and food, to IMF conditions that defund healthcare, to European visa regimes that treat African ambition like a crime. So when ECOWAS imposed sanctions on Burkina Faso after Traoré's rise, young people across West Africa didn't say, ECOWAS is keeping the region stable. They said, ECOWAS is punishing one of us for doing what all of us want to do. That's why the support for Traoré is borderless. He's not just Burkina Faso's president. He's fast becoming a pan-African avatar of courage. The kind that confronts not just France or the EU or the UN, but the very African institutions that have become gatekeepers of the old world. This shift, from traditional respect for ECOWAS to active rejection, didn't come overnight. But Traoré has become the trigger. His popularity has forced youth to draw lines, not between left and right, not between Islam and Christianity, not even between soldier and civilian, but between those who defend Africa's autonomy and those who don't. And in that division, the side that once had all the power, the presidents, the donors, the diplomats, is losing ground to street debates, and a new political consciousness that asks not who got elected, but who stood up. It's this consciousness that makes youth support for Traoré so dangerous, not because it glorifies a military man, but because it exposes how hollow ECOWAS has become to the people it's supposed to serve. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The youth aren't just siding with Traoré because he's different. They're siding with him because he broke the spell, the myth that African leaders can only lead with foreign approval. That myth is dying, and the youth are not mourning it. But why do people hate ECOWAS so much? Once hailed as the engine of regional cooperation, ECOWAS is now being jeered by the very generation it was supposed to unite. For many young Africans, the bloc that was created to defend their future has become a fortress protecting their oppressors. And if the street chants, protest placards, and social media movements are anything to go by, ECOWAS is no longer seen as a symbol of West African unity. It's a symbol of betrayal. This isn't just a mood shift. It's a collapse of legitimacy, and it's been building for years. The tipping point wasn't just about sanctions or coups. It was about who gets punished and who gets protected. When ECOWAS rushed to condemn the military transitions in Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso, many youth asked a simple question. Where was this urgency when our elected governments were stealing, killing, and lying? The silence was deafening. Senegal, for example, saw widespread protests against police violence and political repression in recent years. Journalists were jailed. Opposition leaders were banned from running. But ECOWAS issued no hardline statements, no travel bans, no asset freezes. Yet when Burkina Faso's military ousted a government that had failed to stop an insurgent takeover of half the country, ECOWAS moved swiftly, not against the insurgents, but against the soldiers fighting them. To the youth, the message was clear. ECOWAS protects the powerful, not the people. Even in Ghana, long considered a democratic success story, young people whisper about ECOWAS as if it's a distant uncle who only visits when the family is about to be punished. The bloc's presence isn't felt in the economy, in schools, or job creation. It's only felt during sanctions, press briefings, or when Western envoys need a talking point about African-led solutions. That's the core of the problem. ECOWAS no longer feels African-led. It feels Western-backed and elite-protected. Its headquarters in Abuja may be in Africa, but its compass seems fixed elsewhere. Youth groups have noticed how ECOWAS often mirrors the positions of Paris, Brussels, and Washington, especially when it comes to rejecting any government that doesn't follow the civilian transition roadmap, even if that civilian roadmap leads right back to chaos. Worse, the bloc has yet to evolve its model. In a region with rapidly shifting demographics, security threats, and economic shocks, ECOWAS still insists on textbook democracy. Ballots first, stability later. But the youth are living in the real world, not in textbooks. They live in communities where ballots are bought, where opposition voices are silenced, where elections are supervised by the very regimes they're supposed to challenge. And they're tired of hearing ECOWAS preach democracy while ignoring its abuse. That's why movements in universities and online platforms are now calling for what they term a second liberation. The first was from colonial rule. The second must be from neo-colonial institutions in African clothing. To many of these movements, ECOWAS is the perfect example, a black face with a white voice. Youth-led coalitions like Pan-African Generation and the New Sahel movement have begun drafting petitions, organizing forums, and building cross-border solidarity, not to abolish ECOWAS, but to force it to change or collapse under its irrelevance. They demand new metrics for legitimacy, not just whether a government holds elections, but whether it delivers food, jobs, education, and security. They want ECOWAS to stop punishing governments that break away from the West and start punishing governments that betray their citizens. They want the bloc to become a platform for African sovereignty, not a bouncer for the old colonial club. There's also a generational element. Most ECOWAS leaders are over 60. Most of Africa is under 25. The result is a continental age gap in expectations, values, and urgency. The elders speak of diplomacy, patience, and compliance. The youth speak of justice, action, and defiance. Captain Traoré speaks their language. ECOWAS does not. When ECOWAS tried to isolate Traoré, it only amplified him. When it warned against the dangers of military rule, it sounded to young ears like it was warning against independence itself. And when it threatened economic punishment, it forgot that most young people are already economically punished by debt, joblessness, and foreign control. The frustration is no longer just political, it's existential. Many young Africans are beginning to question whether the very institutions created after independence were ever meant to serve them, or simply to keep order until the next generation of Western-backed leaders arrived. And that is the danger ECOWAS now faces. It is not being attacked with bombs or coups. It is being attacked with questions it cannot answer. What have you done for the African youth? What have you done to protect African sovereignty? What have you done to punish the elites who fail their people? The more ECOWAS avoids these questions, the louder the youth become. And at this rate, if ECOWAS does not reform, it won't be overthrown. It will be left behind. But can ECOWAS be fixed? When institutions lose legitimacy, people don't wait around hoping they'll fix themselves. They build something new. And that's exactly what Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have started doing. What began as a shared rebellion against ECOWAS interference has quietly evolved into the birth of a new alliance. A coalition that doesn't just defy the West African status quo, it offers a bold, radically African alternative to it. This alliance, often called the Alliance of Sahel States, didn't come into being through press conferences or foreign summits. It was born out of shared abandonment. These three nations were isolated, sanctioned, and publicly scolded by ECOWAS for refusing to follow its prescribed democratic timelines. But instead of backing down, they turned toward each other and found in their shared exclusion a strange new freedom. For the first time in decades, three neighboring countries, each facing violent insurgencies and economic hardship, decided to stop waiting for permission. They began charting their own future, together. The result is a tripartite pact that covers military cooperation, economic integration, and political solidarity. And it's growing faster and more effectively than many thought possible. Militarily, they've coordinated joint counterinsurgency efforts in a way that ECOWAS, despite all its resources, never could. These are not symbolic meetings. These are active joint operations, where troops from different Sahel states are sharing intelligence, weapons, and battlefield experience to flush out insurgent strongholds that have plagued their regions for years. More than that, the alliance has moved to cut off French military presence and replace it with sovereign defense initiatives. In Burkina Faso and Mali, foreign military bases were shut down or pushed out, and rather than chaos, there has been a surprising consolidation of internal control. The message is simple. We may be broke, but we're not broken. Economically, they're moving toward resource independence. One of their most revolutionary ideas has been to consider a new regional currency, possibly backed by gold, to end reliance on the CFA franc, a colonial relic still tied to the French treasury. While these plans are early and ambitious, they've captured the imagination of young economists and activists alike. The idea that African countries could print and manage their currency without needing to ask for France's blessing has sparked a wildfire of intellectual debate across the continent. Simultaneously, there's been a push to redirect natural resource wealth toward domestic development. In Niger, which holds some of the world's richest uranium deposits, leaders have begun renegotiating extraction contracts that were once tilted heavily in favor of French energy companies. In Burkina Faso, Captain Traoré has moved to nationalize parts of the gold industry. The alliance is making it clear. The era of resource looting is over. But it's not just military and economics. There's also a psychological shift underway. For decades, the idea of African unity was treated like a museum piece, something to admire but never touch. The Pan-Africanism of the 1960s had faded into slogans and ceremonial speeches. But in these three countries, unity is no longer theoretical. It's operational. It's being tested and built not in air-conditioned conference rooms, but in the harsh realities of desert warfare, food insecurity, and foreign pressure. This is precisely why the youth across the Sahel and beyond are rallying behind this alliance. Because it feels real, it feels earned, and it feels like it finally puts Africa first, not as a slogan, but as a strategy. Meanwhile, ECOWAS is watching with increasing unease. Every successful step the Sahel Alliance takes is a direct indictment of ECOWAS's failure. Every insurgent stronghold reclaimed, every contract renegotiated, every cross-border military success, all of it points to one uncomfortable truth. The bloc ECOWAS tried to shame into compliance is now doing more for regional security and cooperation than ECOWAS itself. Diplomatically, this has put ECOWAS in a bind. Reintegrating these countries without acknowledging their demands would be political suicide. But standing firm on its traditional model, one that demands civilian elections on tight schedules, foreign military assistance, and compliance with trade rules designed in European boardrooms, is proving increasingly out of touch with on-the-ground realities. And as ECOWAS hesitates, a bigger question is being asked across West Africa. What if the Sahel alliance isn't a temporary rebellion but the future? After all, this new alliance is doing what ECOWAS claimed it would do but never delivered, confronting insecurity, defending sovereignty, and building economic autonomy. This doesn't mean the Sahel bloc is without flaws. There are enormous hurdles ahead, from financial sustainability to human rights concerns to long-term political planning. But its most important achievement so far isn't any single policy or military operation. Its biggest achievement is proof that an African alliance can operate without Western supervision, that neighbors can trust each other without ECOWAS arbitration. Those bold moves can be made without donor conferences and European consultants. In a region starved of sovereignty, that proof is priceless. And for ECOWAS, it's a threat that can't be ignored, not because it's violent or extreme, but because it's working. So, after mass protests, it's no longer a debate, it's a declaration. The Alliance of Sahel States (AES) has replaced ECOWAS in the hearts of the people. Across Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, thousands have taken to the streets not just to denounce ECOWAS, but to celebrate AES as the only bloc that truly represents their interests. ECOWAS, once seen as a pillar of West African unity, now stands accused of protecting corrupt elites, enforcing Western agendas, and punishing sovereign choices. The youth no longer wave ECOWAS flags. They wave AES banners. They chant for Traoré, Goïta, and Tiani, not the aging presidents sitting in Abuja conference rooms. In the eyes of the people, ECOWAS represents lectures and sanctions. AES represents resistance and solutions. The new alliance has begun coordinating military action, rejecting foreign control, and talking openly about a post-CFA currency. These aren't gestures, they're blueprints for liberation. What began as defiance has evolved into direction. The people have made their choice not through ballots, but through boots on the ground. They've moved on. And in doing so, they've buried more than just a broken institution. They've buried the illusion that ECOWAS still speaks for West Africa. AES hasn't just replaced ECOWAS. It has inherited the future. Do you think AES has replaced ECOWAS? Will locals ever accept ECOWAS again? Let us know in the comment section. Should ECOWAS shut down completely? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.